Former anti-vaxxers, what caused you to change your mind? Thanks for joining me again, guys. If it is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe because I do these videos every single day. Let's get into this one. I was a teenager, used to believe that if I got sick, my immune system would handle it and make me stronger. Like most youth, I believed I was invulnerable. I figured thousands of years of ancestors had survived without vaccines, and so could I. It was years before I realised that before vaccines, people didn't just heal the virus away, most of them died or were crippled by illness their whole lives. My great-great-aunt got polio at the age of 16, about 1906, and was paralysed from the waist down. She became wheelchair bound, and the wheelchairs back then looked like torture devices. She lived to 100 and died around 1990. I can't imagine 84 years of life in a wheelchair. She married, no kids, but how she kept her mind together, I'll never know. I'll give you a historical one. In 1736, I lost one of my sons, a fine boy of 4 years old, by the smallpox, taken in the common way. I long regretted bitterly, and still regret, that I had not given it to him by inoculation. This I mention for the sake of parents who omit that operation on the supposition that they should never forgive themselves if a child died under it. My example showing that the regret may be the same either way, and that, therefore, the safer should be chosen. Benjamin Franklin. Famous kite flyer. My ex-husband was a very controlling person and did not want our kids to get vaccines. I was always so scared knowing my kids had no protection. One day, one of our kids scraped themselves on a fence and the school called me. I snapped and took them straight to an urgent care for a tetanus shot and just started secretly getting all my kids vaccines. We eventually divorced and now all my kids are fully caught up. Good for you. I've heard that it's really hard to get out of those situations. Yeah, like tetanus is no joke. No joke at all. My mum told me last week when we were talking about a COVID-19 vaccine that she nearly didn't have my brother and I vaccinated. I was shocked because she was a nurse for years and years, and she now stresses the importance of getting our yearly flu vaccinations and pushes my needle-phobic dad to get his. Basically, when she was doing her nurse training back in the early 70s, she did a few weeks on the only ward in the country at the time for people with profound and multiple disabilities, PMLD. The majority were born with PMLD or had them as a result of oxygen deprivation at birth. But she was told that a handful of them developed them following vaccine injury. Not sure if this is a medically accepted term, but those are the words she used, from a single bad batch of vaccines for measles and rubella, I think. By the time my brother and I were born in 1988 and 1990, she was still affected by what she'd seen back in the 70s, and although she'd seen the progress in vaccinations and there were no more reports of these bad batches of vaccines, she didn't allow them to give us our first vaccine doses on time. It wasn't until my aunt, also a trained nurse, showed her the latest stats and research about vaccines that she reluctantly decided to have us vaccinated. I was 1 year old at the time and scheduled for the MMR jab. It was the MR vaccine that she was told caused these vaccine injuries, and she was very reluctant to go ahead with it, but ultimately agreed that both my brother and I, 2.5 at the time, needed to catch up on all our vaccines. She didn't take us to get them, she sent my dad instead, again needle phobic, and he and I apparently cried the whole time. She told me that she's glad she decided for us to get vaccines as we've been mostly healthy since then, and if it hadn't been for our aunt, we might not have ever been vaccinated. Good for you, aunt. I don't really know why I didn't like the idea of vaccines, but I didn't until my girlfriend had gotten pregnant and then I stepped on a rusty nail, like the only way to stop tetanus is the vaccine. My girlfriend was pregnant and asked what I would do if my daughter picked up tetanus. After I told her I stepped on a rusty nail, she was unaware how tetanus or really any vaccines work, if that gives any insight to anti-vaxxers. Not all, but yeah. Well, the other way would be coma, tube and pray, I guess. Not sure if that'd help. It can cause spasms so they break bones. And now I need to double check if I'm due a booster. Yeah, everyone do that. Hard to say, but reading, honestly. I was on the elderberry, colloidal silver, whatever natural bullshit flavour of the week in my late teens, early 20s. Could dig up some obscure study from the 1960s to support it. Well, flu shots aren't 100% effective. What's the point? Have you seen all the people who get sick from it, etc., etc.? Simply put, I had bad advice from some of my father's vitamin shop, libertarian, naturopath, whatever friends. In grad school, I took more statistics classes, kept reading about data analysis, started to learn what significant sample sizes mean, common logical and statistical fallacies, and surprise, most anti-science nonsense doesn't hold up empirically at all. There's just no data to support it, and requires torturing of statistics and misrepresentation to defend their case. Luckily, I don't have some epic story of a family member dying from a preventable disease, but it's still embarrassing to think back how arrogantly I was convinced I was more clever than the actual doctors and scientists. My now wife was an anti-vaxxer. I generally go with what she says most of the time because I cannot be bothered to argue. However, when we were discussing getting married and having kids, I was surprised at how strongly I felt about it. I was prepared to walk away from the love of my life rather than not vaccinate. I gave all of the reasons. I'm from a third world country and she is European. I have seen too much from a lack of vaccination programs to sit on the fence on this. She came around. When our first was born, he was quite ill. I don't think we were in danger of losing him, but just that tiny bit of danger reiterated the point of protecting them and others from illness. My wife is now more on top of the vaccination dates for our kids than I am. A friend of hers had a baby recently and expressed some anti-vaccination sentiments. My wife calmly told her that not only would she be putting her own kids in danger, but that she would be weaponizing her child against others. Quite a turnaround. Weaponizing your child. Now that is a way to put it. Wow. Kind of boring, but I have a whack job grandmother who believes all the pseudoscience health BS. Crystal healing, electromagnetic communications, cause cancer, vaccines are bad, eat apricot pits to cure cancer, the whole 9 miles. When I was a kid, she tried to teach me all of this stuff like it was gospel, and I believed her because I was a kid, and why would my grandma be wrong about something? Unfortunately for her, the minute I turned like 7, I got a huge hyperfixation on biology and quickly learned that all the stuff she spouted was utter BS. I'm autistic and I was like the stereotypical autistic kid where they just know a ton about one particular subject and devour any kind of learning material related to it they can get their hands on. I'm actually still like that, except now I can get a degree for it. It was not hard for me to realise that none of the things she believed made any sense, even as a kid. I met my mother-in-law, who was the ultimate anti-vaxxer, and realised how fucking crazy she sounds, and I didn't want to end up like that. Also, I have a baby daughter who I would like to live a long, healthy life. Yeah, that's a good reason. I read an article about a mom who changed her view on vaccinations because of how radical the anti-vax groups were. A lot of them were anti-gay, anti-abortion, and so crazy about all of it. Pro the dumbest like oils, pushed the agendas of things that were obviously false. It made her step back and change her entire outlook on the anti-vax movement. I wish I could find this article. It was pretty interesting. Probably on Facebook, but she made great points against them. Some of my immediate family flooded their social media with anti-vax, pro-oil and expensive organic rubbish because it's so much better for you, and then simultaneously smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol and pump their face full of Botox and collagen. Pretty sure none of that is healthy, and from organic sources, I find it so hypocritical. No, see, it's like when you order a Diet Coke so you can have the large order of fries. It cancels out. Sarcasm. Not me, but my cousin. She was extremely anti-vax for most of her life, and she refused to vaccinate her kids when they were born. Her second baby caught whooping cough, passed it to her first kid, and they both almost died. According to her, nearly losing her kids made her realise that she was an idiot for not vaccinating them. I am allergic to the vaccine for whooping cough, and I caught it when I moved states. As a then 23-year-old man, I thought I was going to die from it. You don't just vaccinate to protect yourself, you do it to protect others. I was a stereotypical, naturalistic vegan type. Didn't believe in essential oils or crystal healing or anything. I just believed, mistakenly, that you couldn't beat nature and the vaccines were messing around with my baby's natural immunity growth. I believed they were an unnecessary risk. I knew my decision was controversial, so I kept it quiet. I wouldn't have been out campaigning or splashing all over social media. It was a private decision. I held off until he was 2. We don't routinely vaccinate for chickenpox here in the UK, so he got it, which is expected. However, he got a bacterial infection on top and had to spend a night in hospital. Nothing too traumatic, but I realised I didn't have the balls to play nature versus medicine anymore. Yeah, especially not with your child's life. Not me, but my nonna. She's always been into oils, healing rocks, potatoes and socks, all that weird shit. When I was sick, she would give me a bath and run her hand right above my skin from head to toe to draw out the sickness. When my youngest cousin was born, she practically moved into my aunt's house and went everywhere with them. When she took him to get his shots, my nonna started fussing with a paediatrician and he just talked. All he did was explain to her and she finally understood how batshit she sounded. She still firmly believes that my cat is going to steal my firstborn's breath, but we're working on it. Your cat is gonna what? Hey, my first goal. Thank you. My mom is anti-vax, and I'm reminded every day of how annoying she is because she's also against vaccines for COVID-19 and thinks that the whole rule about wearing face masks is to move America to Islamic rule with women covering their faces and everything. She's also hugely Islamophobic, and long story short, I hate being home. That is quite the leap. I almost commend the creativity. She must be in excellent shape from all those mental gymnastics. That is crazy. I realised my reasons to anti-vax were actually rooted in anxiety, result of childhood trauma. The process started a little over a year ago. I just had my third, and I was homeschooling my eldest, kindergarten. The initial push to dealing with it was the regret of not being able to enrol my eldest in public school, and my newborn being at risk for having unvaccinated siblings. I took a hard look at my choices and why I hadn't vaccinated my first two, and every last one was because of fear and guilt. I found a rockstar paediatrician who didn't once judge me and got all my kids caught up. I have 3 fantastic kids that are now fully vaccinated, and I am successfully on the road to recovery so I can be the best person I can for my kids. They deserve it. I wasn't really an anti-vaxxer by today's standard and definition, but back then I did question the validity of it. I used to wear my tinfoil hat back in the Facebook days and delved into some wacko shit like the usual Illuminati, lizard people, hollow moon and other shit. I guess after I grew apart from my friends who were also into all that, I gradually came back to reality and realised how dumb it all is. Ah man, I used to love YouTube conspiracy videos, everything from 9/11 to GMOs and Illuminati taking over the world, but not even then did I think for 1 second that vaccines are evil. Now that I'm older, I can see how stupid all of these seem. I mean, if I were an evil mogul bent on world domination, why the hell would I hide my plans in music lyrics like a Scooby-Doo episode? I think most people like the idea of something bigger and being one of the few to see it. Yeah, I definitely know some people like that. Well, after years of deluding myself into the belief that vaccines were evil, I finally hit the wall. I learned more about vaccines and why they were really necessary. I think it was my fear of the unknown that prevented me from seeing that science saves lives. I had a really good teacher in that regard, and it ended up being a pretty great time in my life. I mean, on top of realising that shots weren't bad things, I started getting an allowance, and my 10th birthday party was f***ing lit. Alright then. I was caught into the anti-vax propaganda after my youngest sister was said to have autism. Reddit helped me change my mind, with people providing evidence of anti-vaxxers' stupidity. What can I say, except you're welcome. You could spell "your" correctly, but yeah. I didn't like needles, then my mom told me I could stay home from school the next day. I was 6. A lot of anti-vaxxers are just rationalising their fear of needles. I am terrified of needles, but I still understand the importance of vaccines. I realised I was behind on some vaccine or other when I was about to go to uni, and I had heard horror stories of new students getting measles or whatever, so I still went and got the injection. I did pass out during the process, but at least I'm safe. To be honest, injections aren't as bad as blood tests. I had to have a blood test a few months ago. I'm a grown-ass adult, but I still asked my mum to come with me, and the second I saw the needle, I started crying like a toddler. But that's no excuse for pushing an anti-vax agenda. It would have been a lot worse if I got sick and had to go to hospital. Literally had someone on Facebook tell me today that humans live too long as it is and that science shouldn't be trusted. Well, if you're going to have a controversial opinion, you might as well hold it for a reason somewhat based in reality. At least that person accepts that vaccines help people's lives. People have been living into their 80s without vaccines for millennia. It's just that more people live into their 80s now because of preventable diseases. I passed through a graveyard back from the 1800s on a walk the other day. I was surprised at how young most of the people died, 30, 40 years old. It's incredible how many more people are able to live to an older age thanks to new advancements in medicine. My mom and dad used to be anti-vax until I was almost kicked out of the school I was accepted into for not having the required vaccinations. Back then this school was a really good school that was hard to get into, and my parents didn't want me to go to a normal school, and so they started Googling until eventually they found out it wasn't what they thought it was. They originally thought, and kind of still do, vaccines were just mercury mixed with a virus along with mind control chemicals. What? My mum's cousin and his wife converted to Catholicism and became anti-vax. Their children nearly died from diphtheria. They got them vaccinated after that. No, I'm not saying Catholicism is inherently anti-vax, just how it happened in their family. I watched an episode of Call the Midwife where a character got diphtheria, which led me down a rabbit hole of Googling diphtheria, which is horrible. Needless to say, I got my TDAP booster ASAP. Who says TV doesn't teach you anything? I love Call the Midwife. Not me, my wife. My wife is actually brilliant, one of the smartest people I know. Nobody would have ever guessed this about her. She was against vaccinations for our second because she was concerned that our first son ended up on the spectrum because of the vaccines he was given. It was all about fear of the unknown and control. Externally, it was, I just want to be sure we are doing the best we can for him. Really, it was, I'm afraid of making the wrong choice, and I don't realise that inaction is a choice. She never said no vaccines, she said let's wait. I never relented. I had 2 points for my wife that kept coming up. 1, we have no reason to believe that vaccines cause autism. 2, I'd rather our kids be autistic than dead. The first one started with those exact words and basically never changed. The second one was a slow build-up over time until I finally got to that exact wording. She cried, she realised that she felt the exact same way, she thanked me. All 3 of our kids get vaccines at normal times, except when a paediatrician who knows our medical situation suggests something different. Some people think vaccines cause autism, they are just bad at spelling. Vaccines cause adults. That is a great way to put it and a great way to end the video. Thanks for watching, guys.